Elvis Presley, The Dark Side of the Crown, the birth of an American myth. In the summer of 1977, the world stopped turning for millions of people. The king was dead. Elvis Aaron Presley, the man who had redefined American culture, lay motionless on the bathroom floor of Graceland, his Memphis mansion that had become both palace and prison. But the story of how a poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, became the most famous man in the world and then descended into darkness begins decades earlier, in the depths of the American South. Elvis Presley was more than a singer. He was a cultural earthquake that split American history into before and after. When he first appeared on television screens in 1956, gyrating his hips in ways that scandalized a nation, he unleashed forces that would reshape music, fashion, sexuality, and the very fabric of American society. Parents feared him. Teenagers worshipped him. The establishment tried to contain him, but nobody could stop what Elvis had started. The paradox of Elvis Presley is that he became everything to everyone while slowly becoming nothing to himself. He was the rebel who served in the army, the dangerous man who loved his mother, the sex symbol who sang gospel, the king who died on his throne. His story is America's story, complete with triumph, excess, decay, and denial. The Hungry Years. Elvis Aaron Presley entered the world on January 8, 1935, but he was supposed to have a companion. His twin brother, Jesse Garon, was stillborn, leaving Elvis to carry the weight of two lives. His mother, Gladys, would tell him that he had the strength of two people, the talent of two people, the destiny of two people. This psychological burden would follow him to the grave. The Presleys were dirt poor in Tupelo, Mississippi, moving from shack to shack, always one step ahead of eviction. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, spent 8 months in prison for forging a check when Elvis was 3 years old. The family's poverty was crushing, but it was in this crucible that Elvis discovered music. He absorbed everything: the gospel songs from the Assembly of God Church, the blues from the black neighborhoods, the country music from the radio. He was a sponge soaking up the sounds of the South. In 1948, the family fled to Memphis, seeking opportunity in the city. They lived in boarding houses and housing projects, surrounded by poverty and desperation. Elvis was a strange kid, a loner who dressed differently, styled his hair with rose oil and Vaseline, and carried his guitar everywhere. The other kids mocked him, called him names, sometimes beat him up. But Elvis had discovered something that would become his armor and eventually his prison: his ability to transform himself through music. The mythology says that Elvis walked into Sun Records in 1953 to record a song for his mother's birthday. The truth is more complex. He was 18 years old, desperate to escape poverty and burning with ambition. Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, had been searching for a white man who could sing with the soul and authenticity of a black artist. When he heard Elvis, he knew he had found his gold mine. The Devil's Bargain. In July 1954, Elvis recorded "That's All Right," a song that would change everything. The fusion of country and rhythm and blues created something new: rockabilly, rock and roll, a sound that would conquer the world. But from the very beginning, there were those who saw Elvis as a threat to the social order. His music was called Satan's music. His movements were deemed obscene. His very existence challenged the racial boundaries that segregated the South. By 1955, Elvis had signed with RCA Records and come under the management of Colonel Tom Parker, a mysterious figure who claimed to be from West Virginia, but was actually an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands named Andreas van Kuijk. Parker would control every aspect of Elvis's career, taking up to 50% of his earnings, making decisions that would ultimately trap Elvis in a golden cage. The Colonel was a carnival barker who had found the ultimate attraction. And he would never let it go. The rise was meteoric. Heartbreak Hotel hit #1 in 1956. Elvis appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, filmed from the waist up to hide his scandalous hip movements. Teenage girls screamed and fainted. Money poured in. Elvis bought Cadillacs for strangers, moved his parents into Graceland, surrounded himself with a group of loyal followers who would become known as the Memphis Mafia. But even as Elvis conquered America, the darkness was creeping in. His mother, Gladys, struggled with alcoholism and prescription drugs, unable to cope with her son's fame. Elvis himself began taking amphetamines to maintain his grueling schedule of recording, touring, and making movies. The pills helped him stay thin, stay awake, stay perfect. They also began to change him. The Gilded Cage. In 1958, at the height of his fame, Elvis was drafted into the army. Many thought his career was over. Colonel Parker, always the schemer, turned it into a publicity triumph. Elvis served honorably in Germany, where he met Priscilla Beaulieu, a 14-year-old girl who would eventually become his wife. Their relationship began when she was still a child, a fact that would raise uncomfortable questions in later years. While in Germany, Elvis discovered something that would accelerate his downfall. Prescription amphetamines were freely available, and he began taking them in massive quantities. He also suffered the greatest loss of his life when Gladys died in August 1958. Elvis was devastated, crying uncontrollably at her funeral, throwing himself on her coffin. He would never fully recover from her death. When Elvis returned from the army in 1960, the world had changed. The Beatles were on the horizon. Bob Dylan was writing poetry. The innocent rebellion of the 50s was giving way to the radical transformation of the 60s. Colonel Parker's solution was to lock Elvis into a series of formulaic movies, 31 films that paid well but destroyed Elvis's credibility as an artist. Elvis knew the movies were garbage, but he was trapped by contracts, by Parker's control, by his own need for money to support his growing entourage. The 60s were a wasteland for Elvis artistically. While the Beatles revolutionized music, while the Rolling Stones pushed boundaries, while Jimi Hendrix redefined the guitar, Elvis was singing to puppets in forgettable films. He grew depressed, angry, disconnected from the culture he had helped create. He retreated deeper into Graceland, surrounded by yes-men, consuming pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to perform, pills to feel nothing. The Long Goodbye. The 1968 comeback special was supposed to resurrect Elvis's career. Dressed in black leather, performing with raw intensity, he reminded the world why he was the king. For a moment it seemed like Elvis might reclaim his throne, but the comeback was really the beginning of the end. In 1969, Elvis began his Las Vegas residency, performing 2 shows a night, 7 days a week. The schedule was punishing, and Elvis relied increasingly on prescription drugs to get through it. His doctor, George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, prescribed thousands of pills: Demerol, Dilaudid, Percodan, Quaaludes, Valium, and dozens of other substances. Elvis's body began to break down. He gained weight, forgot lyrics, gave rambling monologues on stage. His marriage to Priscilla collapsed in 1972. She had taken a lover, unable to compete with Elvis's first love, the pills that numbed his pain. Elvis responded by increasing his drug use, by surrounding himself with more bodyguards, by buying more guns, by descending deeper into paranoia. He became obsessed with law enforcement, collecting police badges, even meeting with President Nixon in 1970 to request a federal narcotics badge, all while consuming enough prescription drugs to kill a normal person. The final years were a horror show in slow motion. Elvis would shoot televisions when he didn't like what was on. He would rent entire movie theaters and amusement parks to avoid the public. He would eat enormous quantities of food, then take laxatives and diet pills to lose weight. His concerts became erratic. Sometimes he was brilliant, channeling all his pain into heartbreaking performances. Other times he could barely stand, slurring his words, forgetting where he was. The king is dead. Long live the king. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found dead on his bathroom floor at Graceland. He was 42 years old. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, but the truth was more complex. The autopsy revealed 14 different drugs in his system. His heart was enlarged, his arteries were clogged, his colon was impacted. Years of prescription drug abuse had destroyed his body from the inside out. But death did not end Elvis's story. Almost immediately, conspiracy theories began to circulate. Some claimed Elvis had faked his death to escape the pressures of fame. Sightings were reported across the country. People claimed to have seen him at gas stations, burger joints, grocery stores. The Elvis death hoax became a cottage industry, spawning books, documentaries, and tabloid headlines. The theories persist, because people cannot accept that someone so vital, so revolutionary, could die such an ordinary, pathetic death. A king should die in battle, not on a bathroom floor. The conspiracy theories are a form of denial, a refusal to acknowledge that fame and fortune could not save Elvis from himself. More disturbing are the questions that were never fully answered. Why did the autopsy results remain sealed for so long? Why were there discrepancies in the official timeline of his death? What role did Dr. Nick play in Elvis's demise? Why did Colonel Parker show so little emotion at Elvis's death, immediately moving to monetize the tragedy? The eternal King Elvis Presley has been dead for nearly 50 years, yet he remains more present in American culture than many living artists. Graceland attracts more visitors than any American home except the White House. Elvis impersonators exist in every corner of the globe. His music still sells millions of copies. His image adorns everything from coffee mugs to slot machines. For the generation that lived through the Elvis phenomenon, he represents their youth, their rebellion, their lost innocence. He was the soundtrack to their first loves, their first heartbreaks, their first taste of freedom. When they listen to Elvis now, they are not just hearing music, they are traveling through time, returning to a moment when anything seemed possible. But Elvis also serves as a warning. He was the first modern celebrity to be destroyed by fame, the prototype for every talented artist who would trade their soul for success and pay the ultimate price. From Michael Jackson to Prince to Whitney Houston, the pattern repeats: extraordinary talent, unprecedented fame, prescription drugs, early death. The tragedy of Elvis Presley is not just that he died young. It is that he spent the last decade of his life as a prisoner in a golden cage, unable to escape the image that Colonel Parker had created, unable to stop the pills that numbed his pain, unable to reclaim the authentic artist he had once been. He became a ghost haunting his own life, performing a parody of himself night after night in Las Vegas, dying a little more with each show. Perhaps that is why the conspiracy theories persist. It is easier to believe that Elvis escaped, that he is living somewhere under an assumed name, finally free from the burden of being Elvis Presley. It is easier than accepting the truth, that the king of rock and roll died alone, afraid, and broken, reaching for help that never came. Elvis gave America its soundtrack, its style, its attitude. He showed white America the power of black music. He showed young people they could challenge their parents' generation. He showed the world what American culture could be. But America consumed him in return, demanding more than any human could give, feeding on his talent until there was nothing left but a beautiful corpse. The building still stands at 706 Union Avenue in Memphis, where Sun Records once operated. Tourists come to see the spot where Elvis recorded his first songs, where rock and roll was born. They take pictures, buy souvenirs, and move on, but sometimes late at night, when the street is empty and the neon signs flicker in the darkness, you can almost hear it. The ghost of a young man with a guitar, singing about a broken heart, unaware that he is about to change the world and lose his soul in the process. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977, but in a deeper sense, he had been dying since the moment he became Elvis. The boy from Tupelo was sacrificed to create the king, and the king was sacrificed to maintain the myth. What remains is neither man nor myth, but something in between. A cautionary tale dressed in rhinestones, a tragedy performed to a rock and roll beat, a darkness that glitters like gold. The king is dead. The king will never die. Both statements are true. That is the eternal paradox of Elvis Aaron Presley, the man who had everything and nothing, who changed the world and couldn't change himself, who lives forever in our culture and died alone on a bathroom floor. He was the American dream, and he was the American nightmare. He was Elvis. There will never be another.